Where is the Garden of Eden located? That's the lesson for today. This lesson is based off of, the book of Genesis, the 2nd chapter, and the location of the Garden of Eden and the rivers that encompassed it, and the main river that broke off and made the other 4 bodies of water that pretty much covered the Garden of Eden. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to start in the book of Genesis, the 2nd chapter, go through that and a few other points to make, because you have different so-called scholars out there that try to say that the Garden of Eden was located in Africa. Others say that the Garden of Eden was located in so-called India or Arabia, up in Iraq, Iran, wherever the interest of that particular scholar lies in. That's what they try to say that the Garden of Eden is located, at. But the Garden of Eden is located on what we call, or what's been called, Palestine, Israel, Jerusalem, that area, the Middle East, like up in towards the land of Syria, going up into Mesopotamia, all of that land, all the way going down into Egypt. All of that was fertile land, and that was all part of the promised land that the Lord gave to Abraham. That's why when you go back and you research the inheritance of the children of Israel, their inheritance goes all the way back into the land of Egypt, all the way up until you get to around the Tigris River, up in that area, and when you do the research, you find out that was the inheritance that we received of the Lord, because that was the beginning of civilization after the flood took place. All right, so everything was broken up, because that's like a major hub, a major part of the land, or the fertile land that the Lord established as being the best part of the earth. Mainly beginning within Palestine, Jerusalem, Israel, in that area. That's where them gutter rats are down there trying to get it. Alright, so this is Genesis chapter 2 verse 8. And the Lord power planted a garden eastward in Eden. Now, you have to take consideration into what this is saying, because when people speak about the Garden of Eden, they think that the garden itself was called Eden, and it's not. The whole earth as a whole is called Eden, because the whole earth being Eden is what the Lord called it, because the word Eden from the Hebrew word Aidan means paradise or joy, as we went over in the last lesson. So it says, and the Lord power planted a garden eastward in Eden. So the Lord, out of the whole earth, he planted a particular garden in the east. And what's the most what would be the crux of the east? What they call today the Middle East, Israel and all that. So out of the whole compass of the earth, the Lord took that particular garden and made it in that particular area. All right. It says, and there he put the man whom he had formed, dealing with Adam. And out of the ground made the Lord power to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food, the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And a river, which from the Hebrew word Nahar, so it says that in a river went out of Eden to water the garden. So this particular river went out of Eden to water that particular garden. So there was a particular river that ran down. We're going to find out what that river is that that watered that particular garden that the Lord had set up for man, you know, to dwell in, you know, and to sustain him. And from thence it was parted and became into 4 heads. Now this is a very key point here that you have to pay attention to, because it says, and from thence it was parted, meaning it became split. Okay, so it says and became into 4 heads. Now it never said that it became 4 rivers. It said that it became 4 heads. So basically this is 4 bodies of water, because when you go into breaking down this particular these particular bodies of water, the first thing people would jump up and say when you call out the certain names of these bodies of water, they say, well, look, that particular one is not a river. It never said it was 4 rivers. It said there was a river that watered the garden, and it parted into 4 heads, meaning 4 other bodies of water. It says the name of the first is Paisan. Now Paisan, or Payashawan, it says that is it which compasseth the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold. Now the Paisan river, or Payashawan, is the Red Sea. The reason being because, like I said, when you go back up, it wasn't a river that it was parted into. It was parted into 4 heads, or 4 bodies of water. So the name of the first is Paisan, or Payashawan, which is the Red Sea. That is it which compasseth the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold. Now I'm going to stop right here, and I'm going to go into the Josephus, because there's a good point in there to bring out that I want to make mention of, you know, just, you know, to get point across, because you have information out there, you have disinformation. So we're going to pull up the Josephus, this Antiquities of the Jews, book 1, and then we're going to jump down to chapter 3. All right, but we're only going to read some of it, because I want to go back. I don't want to give the whole thing away. So it says, Moses saith further that the Most High planted a paradise in the east. See, in the east, flourishing with all sorts of trees, and that among them was the tree of life, and another of knowledge, whereby was known that whereby was to be known what was good and evil. And that when he brought Adam and his wife into this garden, he commanded them to take care of the plants. Now the garden was watered by one river, see, one river, which ran round about the whole earth, and was parted into 4 parts. And Paisan, which denotes a multitude running into India, makes his exit into the sea, and is by the Greeks called Ganges. Now it said that it went into India, right? And that it was called Ganges. So they're saying that the Paisan River went into Ganges. Okay, well, we're going to show you that that's completely wrong. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to give you the particular river that was parted, or the particular river that was parted into 4 heads, which when you go to the book in the Apocrypha, to the book of Sirach, the 24th chapter, and just give me 1 second so I can find a verse. I believe it's the 25th verse. It says, I'll start at 24. Faint not to be strong in the Lord, that he may confirm you. Cleave unto him, for the Lord Almighty is the power alone, and beside him there is no other Savior. He filleth all things with his wisdom, as Paisan and Tigris in the time of the new fruits. He maketh the understanding to abound like Euphrates, and as Jordan in the time of the harvest. He maketh the doctrine of knowledge appear as a light, and as Gion in the time of vintage. So now you notice here they mentioned 5 bodies of water. They mentioned the Paisan, they mentioned the Tigris, they mentioned the Euphrates, they mentioned the Gion, and they mentioned Jordan, because Jordan, the river Jordan, is the land is the body of water, or that river that went and watered the garden. Now, as you can see in this map here, you have right up through here, this is the Jordan River. And this whole river watered the garden. That's what it said, it watered the garden. Because remember, it said that the river, that one river, it watered the garden, and then from thence it was parted into 4 heads. So now when you go here, it gives you the Pison, which is one of the 4 heads, the Tigris, which is 2 of the 4 heads, the Euphrates, which is 3 of the 4 heads, and the Gihon, which is 4 of the 4 heads. So what was the river that was parted? Was the River Jordan. So it only makes sense that that particular land or that garden was here in this region, because this is where that particular river watered the garden. That's why when Lot saw the land down going toward, by the River Jordan, going towards Sodom and Gomorrah and them, and he saw that it was very plenteous and that it was well watered and it was, very fruitful, he chose that area to go and live there. And then Abraham went the opposite way because their cattle and their servants were too much. They were bumping into each other, so they had to make that, that decision. But the point is that land was very fruitful. So all of this land here is where the Lord planted the garden in. Okay? So now that we established that the River Jordan is that particular river that ran through there, now let's go back to the book of Genesis, the 2nd chapter, and where we left off. All right, and so it says, 11th verse, the name of the first is Pison, that is it, which compasseth the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold. So now, another key point here to bring out is that it compassed, the Pison River compassed the whole land of Havilah. Now, the land of Havilah, when you go into the scriptures, let's get that real quick. Genesis 25, and just bear with me 1 second so I can find the verse. Genesis 25. And 18, we're just going to go right to the point. This is dealing, matter of fact, I read a little above that because I want to get the point. 13th verse, Genesis 25:13. And these are the names of the sons of Ishmael by their names. I'm sorry, 20, verse 12. Now these are the generations of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar the Egyptian, Sarah's handmaid, bare unto Abraham. All right, so now it's going to give the names of Ishmael's sons, which he had 12 sons. Okay, and as you read through all the names, you jump down to the 18th verse after the names are read. It says, and they dwelt from Havilah unto Shur. So basically, their dwelling, which we know that the so-called Arabs are Ishmaelites, and we know that they live in the land of Arabia and the surrounding areas, but mainly in the land of Arabia. So it says, and they dwell from Havilah unto Shur, that is before Egypt, as thou goest towards Assyria. So that whole land of so-called Arabia is the land of Ishmael, and that particular land there, that region down in the southern part of it, that is considered to be Havilah. Okay, because it says, and they dwelt from Havilah unto Shur, that is before Egypt, as thou goest towards Assyria, and he died in the presence of all his brethren. So now, basically what they were doing is all of this here, this was the land of Havilah. This is so-called Arabia. This is so-called Arabia down here. So this is the land of Havilah. All right. Now, remember, we read in the Josephus that the river Pison was called the Ganges River by the Greeks, and that's over here in India. That has nothing to do with India, because the 4 rivers, or should I say the 4 bodies of water, didn't extend that far over. All right, we'll keep going through it. Back in the book of Genesis, the 2nd chapter, Okay, the 11th verse. The name of the first is Pison, which is the Red Sea. That is it which compasseth the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold. So now, when you look at the map, this is the Red Sea here, and this is where Ishmael's sons dwelt, which is the land of Havilah. And when you look at the Red Sea, it compasseth the whole land of Havilah, as you can see here. So this is the first river that it's speaking of. It's not talking about no Ganges River in the land of India. It's talking about the land where the Arabs or the Ishmaelites lived, and this body of water compasses that whole land. Okay. Now it says, and the name of the second river, and the gold of that land is good. There is bdellium and the onyx stone. Okay, and the name of the second river is Gihon. The same is it that compasses the whole land of Ethiopia. And when you look at the land of Ethiopia, which is here, which really extended further out, because later on they changed a lot of the names, but the Ethiopia extended further out this way, because the actual body of water that compasses the whole land of Ethiopia, coming up from the northern part, is the Nile River. Okay, so the Nile River is that particular land, that particular body of water that compasses the whole land of Ethiopia, because Ethiopia was bigger than this. All these names came later, because when you go back into the actual Hebrew of Genesis the 12th chapter, where it speaks about the Gihon River, and it speaks about the land of Ethiopia, the word there in the Hebrew is Kawash, or Kawash, which that's the land of Cush, which is in the land of so-called Africa. All right, so basically that is the Nile River is the second river, which is the Gihon. And when you read over here in the Josephus, it says, as we read on, because it said the Pison, supposedly the Ganges River, which we just proved that. It says the Euphrates also, as well as the Tigris, goes down into the Red Sea. Now the name Euphrates or Phrath denotes either dispersion or flower. Tigris, the glath, a swift, narrow, blah, blah, blah. It says, and Gihon runs through Egypt, and denotes what arises from the east, which the Greeks called Nile. So the Gihon River was called the Nile River by the Greeks. And they were correct in that, and they were correct, I guess, in calling the Ganges River whatever they called it, but that was not the river of Pison, But in this particular case, on the Gihon River, they were correct. So in the name of the second river is Gihon, the same as it that compasses the whole land of Ethiopia. And these names are there for an example today, so that we won't get tripped up. It says, and the name of the third river is Hiddekel. That is it which goeth towards the east of Assyria. Now, I have a scripture here in the book of Daniel, the 10th chapter, the 4th verse. It says, and in the 4th and 20th day of the first month, as I was by the side of the great river, which is Hiddekel. Now, Hiddekel is the Tigris River. Okay. Now, when you go here, the Hebrew word is Chadakwal. And Chadakwal, and in this particular, it means rapid, because they said it means rapid. In this particular instance, they were correct. One of the rivers of Eden, which coursed east toward Assyria, better known as the Tigris, the 70 equivalent. So the Tigris River is the Hiddekel River, so you could understand. Okay, so when it says, and the name of the third river is Hiddekel, is the Tigris River. That is it which goeth towards the east of Assyria. And the fourth river is Euphrates, which today is still called Euphrates. And the reason why the Lord left it that way, or in that name, is because of the fact that the Lord, had a purpose to leave it that way, so that we can have certain hints today of what to look for. Now we go back to the map. You had the Pison, which is the Red Sea. You had the Gihon, which is the Nile River. You have the Hiddekel, which is the Tigris River. And then you had the Euphrates, which is still called Euphrates. And then you had, as we read in the scriptures, the Jordan River compassed that whole land of Israel right here. So the four bodies of water that this river was broken into was the Red Sea, the Nile River, the Tigris River, and the Euphrates. And those are the four heads that it was broken up into. You know, as you see it, the Pison is the Red Sea, Gihon is the Nile River, Hiddekel is the Tigris River, and Euphrates is still the Euphrates today. So the Garden of Eden, when you locate it according to the scriptures, and when you go into the history of these particular bodies of water, it leads you back to the land of Israel, to Palestine, to Jerusalem. This was the main area here, or the main body of land where the garden was located, but it extended down a little further this way, and then extended up a little further this way, you know, into Mesopotamia, or Ur of the Chaldees, where Abraham was born. You know, so that this is where the Garden of Eden is located, not in Africa, not up in Iran or Iraq, or whatever these so-called scholars say in that fruitcake Yeshaya, but in the land of Israel. And like I said, it extends a little further out and a little further this way when you do the research on the inheritance of the 12 tribes. And when you look at their inheritance has been given to them from that particular land in around the land of Egypt, all the way up as you go into further up into almost into Assyria. You know why? Because that whole land was given to them by Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. You know, so the Garden of Eden is located. This is the main crux right here, because this is the most fertile part of the earth. So that this is where the Garden of Eden is located. You know, so with that, you know, I hope you brothers learn something. Until the next time, I say Shalom.